Worry has a way of creeping into every corner of our lives, wrapping itself around our thoughts, our decisions, and even our faith. It starts small, a thought, a concern, a what if, that seems harmless at first. But before you know it, that one thought turns into a cycle, a loop that plays over and over again in your mind. It wakes you up in the middle of the night. It distracts you when you're trying to focus. It steals the joy out of your victories because you're too busy thinking about the next possible problem. The truth is, worry is not just a feeling, it's a strategy. The enemy knows that if he can keep you worried, he can keep you stuck. He knows that if he can get you to focus on what could go wrong, you'll never move forward into what could go right. Worry is a tool the enemy uses to trap you in a mindset of fear and hesitation. He doesn't have to take away your blessing. She just has to make you so distracted by fear that you don't even recognize them when they show up. Think about it. How many opportunities have slipped through your fingers because you were too worried about failing? How many doors has God opened that you never walked through because worry kept you paralyzed? How many times have you second-guessed yourself, doubted what God was saying, and let fear convince you that you weren't enough? Worry makes us question God's timing. It makes us doubt His provision. It makes us feel like we have to control everything. Because if we don't, who will? And that's exactly what the enemy wants. He wants you so consumed with worry that you forget who's actually in control. The Bible tells us over and over again not to worry. Jesus himself said in Matthew 6:27, "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" Worry doesn't change anything. It doesn't solve problems. It doesn't make the future any more secure. All it does is steal your peace in the present. Yet, so many of us live as if worry is our job. We think that if we stress enough, if we overthink enough, if we run every possible scenario in our minds, somehow we'll be able to control the outcome. But worry doesn't give us control. It just gives us anxiety. One of the biggest lies the enemy tells us is that worrying somehow makes us more responsible. That if we're not worrying, we're not taking things seriously. But trusting God doesn't mean you're being careless. It means you're being faith-filled. It means you're choosing to believe that God knows what He's doing, even when you don't. It means you're shifting your focus from the problem to the problem solver. Worry will have you believing that your future depends entirely on you, when in reality, your future has already been written by the one who holds the universe in his hands. When worry takes over, it doesn't just affect your mind, it affects your actions. It causes hesitation. It makes you delay obedience. It keeps you from stepping into the places God has called you to. You know that nudge you've been feeling? That idea that keeps coming back? That opportunity that keeps knocking? Worry will tell you you're not ready. What if you fail? What if people don't support you? But God is saying, I've already gone before you. I've already made a way. I am with you. Worry thrives in uncertainty. It feeds off the unknown. But the thing is, uncertainty is a part of faith. Faith is trusting God even when you don't have all the details. Faith is moving forward even when you don't see the full picture. Faith is saying, God, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I trust that you do. The enemy knows that if he can keep you focused on what you don't know, he can stop you from trusting in what you do know. And what you do know is that God has never failed you. He has never left you. He has never broken a promise. Look back over your life. How many things were you worried about that never even happened? How many times did God show up and make a way, even when you couldn't see how? How many sleepless nights did you spend stressing over something that God had already worked out? Worry is a thief, and it has stolen enough from you. It has stolen your joy. It has stolen your peace. It has stolen moments that you were supposed to enjoy, moments that you were supposed to step into boldly. But it doesn't have to keep stealing. When you make the decision to stop letting worry run your life, you start living with confidence in God's plan. You start walking with a new level of peace, knowing that the same God who provided for you before will provide again. You start seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. You start embracing the blessings that were always there, instead of being too distracted to notice them. Worry doesn't have to be your default setting. Trust can be, faith can be, peace can be. Because when you truly understand that God is in control, you realize that worry was never meant to be part of your story. Prayer is not just a routine or a last resort when things get tough. It is the most powerful weapon we have against the anxiety that tries to take over our minds. Anxiety is a battle that many of us fight daily, whether it's the stress of finances, relationships, our future, or even things we can't fully explain. It starts with a single thought, a small worry, but then it spreads, growing into fear, doubt, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. We try to reason with it, suppress it, or distract ourselves from it. But the truth is, anxiety doesn't just disappear on its own. It demands a response, and that response must be prayer. When anxiety rises, our natural reaction is often to overthink. We replay conversations, analyze situations from every angle, and try to predict outcomes that are completely out of our control. Our minds become noisy, cluttered with worries that we were never meant to carry. But here's the thing, prayer is the way we silence that noise. It's not about saying the perfect words or following a formula. It's about surrender. It's about taking what's weighing on your heart and placing it in God's hands. Anxiety says, what if? Prayer says, even if. Even if things don't go the way I planned, even if I don't have all the answers, even if I feel uncertain, I know that God is in control. The enemy knows that if he can keep you anxious, he can keep you distracted. Anxiety shifts your focus away from God and onto your problems. It makes you feel like everything depends on you, like you have to figure it all out on your own. But that's a lie. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world. You were never meant to navigate life without the one who created you. And that's why prayer is so powerful. It realigns your focus. It reminds you that you are not alone, that you serve a God who hears you, sees you, and is working on your behalf even when you don't see it. When you pray, you are not just speaking words into the air. You are engaging in a divine exchange. You are handing over your worries and receiving God's peace in return. Philippians 4:6-7 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Notice the promise in that verse. It doesn't say that your problems will instantly disappear, but it does say that God's peace will guard your heart and mind. That means even in the middle of uncertainty, even when life feels chaotic, you can still have peace. Anxiety is relentless, but so is prayer. The more you pray, the more you shift from fear to faith. The more you pray, the more you build a foundation of trust in God. The more you pray, the less power anxiety has over you. It doesn't mean you'll never feel anxious again, but it does mean that anxiety won't have the final say. Because every time anxiety knocks, you have a response. Every time worry tries to creep in, you have a weapon. And that weapon is prayer. Prayer is not just about asking God for things. It's about communion with Him. It's about stepping into His presence and allowing His truth to wash over you. The world will tell you to meditate, to breathe, to practice mindfulness. And while those things can help, they don't have the power to transform. Only God's presence can do that. Prayer is where transformation happens. It's where fear is replaced with faith, where confusion is replaced with clarity, where stress is replaced with surrender. When you make prayer your first response, instead of your last resort, everything changes. One of the biggest lies the enemy tells us is that we have to wait until we feel strong to pray, that we need to have it all together, that we need to be in the right mindset. But prayer is not for the perfecteds, for the broken, the weary, the anxious, and the uncertain. You don't have to have the right words. You just have to show up. God doesn't need eloquence. He needs honesty. He doesn't need performance. He needs surrender. Some of the most powerful prayers are the simplest ones. God, I need you. Lord, I can't do this on my own. Jesus, take this burden from me. It's not about length. It's about authenticity. There are moments in life when anxiety feels so heavy that even praying feels impossible. That's why it's important to build a lifestyle of prayer, not just a habit of praying when things go wrong. When you pray consistently, you are training your heart and mind to trust God before anxiety even has a chance to take root. You are developing a relationship with Him that is deeper than circumstances. You are creating a foundation that will hold you even in the storms of life. And when those storms come, you won't be trying to build your faith in the middle of the battle. You'll already be standing on it. Prayer doesn't mean you won't face challenges. Trusting God is one of the hardest things to do when life feels uncertain. We say we trust Him, but deep down, many of us struggle with letting go of control. We want to know every step, every detail, every outcome before we move. We want guarantees before we take a leap of faith. But the truth is, trust doesn't require full understanding, it requires surrender. God's blessings are not accessed through control, but through trust. The more we try to hold on tightly to our plans, the more we miss out on what God is trying to do in our lives. Control gives a false sense of security. It makes us feel like we are in charge, like we have the ability to manipulate outcomes and determine our future. But the reality is, no matter how much we plan, strategize, or prepare, there will always be things that are out of our hands. There will always be situations that we cannot fix, problems we cannot solve, and paths we cannot see. The more we try to control, the more frustrated we become. The more we try to force things to happen our way, the more we experience anxiety, stress, and exhaustion. Control is exhausting because it was never meant to be our responsibility in the first place. God never asked us to have everything figured out. He never asked us to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. What he asks for is trust. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." That verse doesn't say, figure everything out and then trust God. It doesn't say, have a backup plan just in case God doesn't come through. It says to trust with all your heart. That means releasing control, surrendering the need to understand everything, and believing that God knows what he's doing even when you don't. One of the biggest reasons we struggle to trust God is because we fear the unknown. We fear what might happen if things don't go according to our plans. We fear being disappointed, hurt, or let down. But fear and trust cannot coexist. When fear takes over, trust goes out the window. That's why the enemy works so hard to fill our minds with doubt. He whispers lies that make us question God's timing, his goodness, and his faithfulness. He wants us to believe that if we don't take control, we will miss out. But the truth is, the only way we truly miss out is by not trusting God. God's blessings often require us to step into the unknown. Abraham had to leave his homeland without knowing where God was leading him. Moses had to stretch out his staff over the Red Sea without knowing how God would part the waters. Peter had to step out of the boat onto the water without knowing if he would sink or stand. Every great move of God requires trust. If they had waited until they had all the answers, they would have never experienced the miracles that God had in store for them. Trusting God means believing that his plan is better than yours. It means accepting that his timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with your expectations. It means surrendering your limited perspective for his infinite wisdom. So often we try to rush ahead of God because we think he's taking too long. We try to force doors open instead of waiting for him to lead the way. But what if the delay is actually protection? What if the closed door is actually a blessing? What if what feels like rejection is actually redirection? God sees what we cannot see. He knows what is ahead. He knows what we need and when we need it. And when we trust him, we position ourselves to receive his best. The problem is, we often settle for what we can control instead of waiting for what God has promised. We take matters into our own hands because we are afraid of being disappointed. But trusting God means believing that his blessings are worth the wait. It means refusing to settle for less just because it's easier or more convenient. There are times when trusting God will not make sense. He may ask you to walk away from an opportunity that looks perfect on paper. He may tell you to wait when everything in you wants to move. He may lead you down a path that feels uncertain and uncomfortable. But if you trust him, you will see that his way is always better. What looks like a setback is often a setup for something greater. What feels like a detour is actually part of his divine direction. The reason many people miss out on God's blessings is not because God is withholding from them, but because they refuse to let go of control. They hold onto their own plans so tightly that they leave no room for God to move. They allow fear to keep them stuck in what is comfortable instead of stepping into what is possible. But trust is the key to unlocking the blessings of God. It is the bridge between where you are and where he is leading you. It is the posture that allows you to receive all that he has prepared for you. Panic is a natural response when life feels out of control. It happens when unexpected situations arise, when fear grips your heart, and when the weight of uncertainty feels too heavy to carry. Your mind starts racing with worst-case scenarios, your body tenses up, and before you know it, anxiety has taken over. Panic thrives in moments of uncertainty, and it convinces you that you have to act now, figure everything out, and do something immediately to fix the problem. But reacting in panic only leads to more stress, more confusion, and more exhaustion. It pulls you away from peace, away from wisdom, and most importantly, away from God's presence. The enemy wants you to stay in a constant state of panic because when you panic, you stop praying. Praise, on the other hand, is a choice. It is a decision to shift your focus from the problem to the problem solver. It is choosing to declare God's goodness even when your circumstances are uncertain. It is deciding that even though you don't have all the answers, you will worship the one who does. Praise is powerful because it changes the atmosphere. It reminds you of who God is, what He has done, and what He is capable of doing again. When you praise, you are not ignoring reality. You are declaring a greater reality. You are choosing faith over fear, trust over turmoil, and worship over worry. There is something about praise that confuses the enemy. He expects you to panic. He expects you to break down, to complain, to let fear take over. But when you start praising in the middle of your struggle, he doesn't know what to do with that. Praise is not just about singing songs, it is a weapon. It shifts your perspective, strengthens your faith, and reminds you that your circumstances do not determine your God determines your circumstances. When Paul and Silas were thrown into prison, they had every reason to panic. They had been beaten, chained, and locked away with no way out. But instead of panicking, they praised. They worshiped God in the darkest moment of their lives, and that praise led to a breakthrough. The prison doors flew open, and their chains fell off. Praise is not based on feelings, it is based on truth. If you wait until you feel like praising, you may never do it. But when you make praise your first response, instead of your last resort, something shifts inside of you. Your situation may not change immediately, but your mindset does. Praise reminds you that God is still in control, that He is still working, and that He is still good no matter what. It takes the focus off the problem and places it back on the one who holds all things together. One of the most dangerous things about panic is that it causes you to forget everything God has already done. When you are overwhelmed, it is easy to lose sight of His past faithfulness. But when you begin to praise, you remind yourself of every battle He has already won, every prayer He has already answered, and every situation He has already turned around. That is why praise is so powerful. It builds your faith for what is ahead by reminding you of what God has already done. If He provided before, He will provide again. If He healed before, He will heal again. If He made a way before, He will make a way again. Panic makes you feel like you have to fight your battles alone, but praise reminds you that the battle belongs to the Lord. When Jehoshaphat faced a massive army, he didn't send out warriors, first he sent out worshipers. And as they praised God, the enemy was defeated. Their victory did not come from their strength, their strategy, or their ability to fight. It came from their willingness to worship. There is power in praise that goes beyond what we can see. It releases God's presence into the situation. It shifts the atmosphere, and it brings breakthrough in ways we never expected. Sometimes praise is easy. When things are going well, when prayers are being answered, when blessings are flowing, it is natural to worship. But true faith is revealed when you can praise even when life doesn't make sense. When you are in the middle of the storm, when the diagnosis is uncertain, when the job hasn't come through, when the relationship is struggling, can you still praise? Can you still declare that God is good even when everything around you feels bad? That kind of praise requires trust. It requires believing that God is working even when you don't see it. It requires choosing to lift your hands in surrender instead of clenching your fists in frustration. Praise is not about denying reality. It is about declaring a greater truth. It is saying, I see the problem, but I choose to see my God as bigger. It is shifting your mindset from defeat to victory, from fear to faith, from stress to surrender. It is a daily decision to focus on who God is rather than what you are facing. When you make praise a lifestyle instead of a moment, it changes the way you handle every situation.